Hi there folks, welcome back to the IB and Andy Fishing channel. I hope you're doing really well. We're back here for a review Tuesday and this one's a really big one. But before we get onto that, please, if you're new to the channel, don't forget to give that subs button down there a little tappy. That way you'll be kept in touch with all the news, all the product reviews, all the fishing and all the other stuff that IB and I get up to in this little corner of the internet. If you're a regular sub, thank you very much for joining us again. As I say, big review Tuesday this one. Loads of interest in this in the last few weeks, so I'm going to get straight into it. This is going to be my review of the hotly anticipated Vision Nymph Hero 10-foot 3-weight. Let's get straight into it. Like I say, it's a 10-foot 3-weight, and as you can see, it is a 4-piece rod, as you would expect from most modern fly rods these days. It's quite rare actually to find anything that isn't a 4-piece rod. We'll start down at the butt end because that's where most of the fun stuff is. Let me put that away. First things to notice that stand out as being different and things you'd expect with a kind of a Generation 2 Euro nymphing rod. Right down at the bottom end, we've got a down locking reel seat, which as we all know by now, puts the reel further towards the back end of the rod, makes it easier to balance out your rod with an appropriate reel. I know there's some people that buy into balance and some don't. If you do, you're going to enjoy that down locking reel seat. It's a double locking screw as well, so nice and secure. Keep the reel exactly where you want it, no wobble throughout the course of the day. I really like the fact that Vision have put a fighting butt on this. I really appreciate that with a Euro nymphing rod, and I think that a lot of companies will go that way in the future. In fact, a lot already are. Really nice insert there. Usually fly fishing companies go for some posh, fancy sounding species of tree for the wooden insert. Vision have just described this as wood. To be honest, it really doesn't matter. It's not marked up, it's not swollen, it's not done any of that bad stuff. It's absolutely fine, so we're not worried too much about what kind of wood it actually is. Moving up again a little bit, as you can see, a half Wells cork handle and something straight away that's a little bit different on here. It is incredibly slim, this handle, and that's by design. A lot of the competition guys have started thinning the handles down, taking away the cork, trying to increase the amount of feeling they're getting through the blank, through the rod handle, into their hands. It is really slim, and I think that's a really nice feature, and again, something that will probably start appearing on more nymphing rods going forwards. We'll come up a little bit further, keeper ring, a little bit of branding on there, all that normal stuff you'd expect. And we do have markers on here at 30, 40 and 50 centimetres from the butt of the rod. So if you're the kind of person who gets really anal with measuring out your dropper spacings and stuff like that, or if you want a quick, easy way of measuring a fish, or if you're fishing to competition rules and really need to know that stuff, then it's all on the blank for you, nice and simple. One standout thing about the rod that people have already picked up on in comments on YouTube and on Facebook is the colour of the blank. Now Vision described this as vivid yellow, which it is. In this sort of situation it is. It looks really bright, it looks like a freaking lightsaber. Actually I found that in daylight, in normal light, it really wasn't that bad. Actually, there were a couple of times when I put this rod down up against like dry reeds in the winter and stuff like that, or on dry grass in the winter. And to be honest, it pretty much vanishes. It really isn't as kind of leery yellow as it might look in the promo photos. And I actually think Vision, by describing it as vivid yellow, are probably going to put a few people off. If it reassures you at all, it is nowhere near as bright as it looks in all the promo stuff. It's actually kind of a golden olivey in normal light conditions. It's a really nice looking rod. Coming up, we've got another one of those really nymph rod specific features. We've got a stripper guide on the butt section, which just reduces the distance between that first guide and your reel, so you're not getting loads of line sag in between the butt guide and the reel. Again, these are the sort of features that we are expecting to find on a modern Euro nymphing rod. Generation 2 Euro nymphing rods really ought to have these features. Coming up the blank, and we've got the other three sections, kind of continuation of that vivid green. All the sections have liner liners, so you can make sure these sections are put together properly. It's nice to have on there. Again, it's kind of stuff you'd expect to have on a modern fishing rod these days. Even 50, 60 quid rods have got this stuff, but it does help to have it there, no doubt about it. You'd rather have it than not, that's for sure. Single leg guides right the way through, quite tightly spaced. Again, as a nymphing rod, you would expect the spacings to be slightly tighter, so you're not getting loads of line sag in between your guides. So again, stuff you'd expect, but stuff that is absolutely essential for a modern Euro nymphing rod, in my opinion. So single legs right the way up until the tip section, where the penultimate guide on there is a snake. Now the reason that a lot of manufacturers are starting to put a snake guide up at the top gear is that kind of your modern Spanish leaders, your modern French leaders, or your just very thin straight mono leaders, if that's what you prefer, they're a lot more prone to wrapping around the end of the rod blank. So if you've got a snake or a couple of snakes up there, it just helps when you make a cast. It's more likely to slide off the rod rather than get caught behind one of the single legs. I must admit I wouldn't have minded a second snake on there, because I did find there were a few times when it get wrapped around this one, but it really isn't the end of the world. Again, it's nice to have that Generation 2 nymph rod, your more modern Euro nymph rod, should have those sorts of features. So in essence, that is what we've got there. That is the kind of tech spec of the 10 foot 3 weight. It comes with a Cordura tube, as you'd expect. There's no rod bag in there, it's just a partition tube. Nice simple thing. As you know, once my rods come out of the tube, they never really go back in it, but it does come in a tube. Vision are saying it's 36 ton carbon, which is pretty good quality actually. That's not bad at all, particularly for the price point. We'll get onto price pretty soon. Vision website tells us the rod weighs in at 78 grams. I just weighed mine on kitchen scales at 81, so that sounds accurate enough. It's probably my kitchen scales that are dodgy rather than Vision's stated rod weight. And actually, for its class, that's pretty light. That's one of the lighter 10 foot 3 weights on the market for the kind of money we're talking about for the Nymph Hero. So that's all the kind of techie specky stuff. What we want to know is how it fishes. And as I said at the very start, I spent a lot of time with this rod, a huge amount of time fishing this because I wanted to make sure I got this right. Given the price point it's at, given the tech spec it's at and the amount of features it's got, this is a rod that everyone is going to look at for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years as a kind of a benchmark of what a 200 quid Euro nymph rod should be like. I've fished it with 3 different rigs. I've fished it with my preferred method using a 9 meter French leader. I've fished it with a very fine Spanish leader, and I've fished it with a Euro nymph fly line, which again, you guys know, I'm not massively keen on Euro nymph fly lines, but I know a lot of people use them, so I wanted to make sure that I could check it out and see how it works on this rod, so I could give you guys the full lowdown. In terms of the French leader stuff, as I say, that's what I prefer to use for most of my fishing. It handled pretty much everything I wanted to do with it absolutely fine, from fishing right below the rod tip kind of check style, to being able to extend it out to 6, 7, 8, 9 meters of range. It did pretty much everything I wanted from it. Again, because of the guide spacings, because of the guide on the butt ring, there's no great line sag, so that's really nice if you're trying to keep it touch at long range. It's sensitive enough that you'll detect your takes at longer range again, which is really, really important. I was able to carry fairly heavy flies with it. Once I got down to the lighter ranges in the flies, a kind of pair of 2mm beads or something like that, it probably struggled with that a little bit more. But that's, to be honest, that's probably the kind of stuff that the majority of UK nymph anglers will do less of. I reckon in the UK we tend to err on the heavier side, the 2.5, 3.5mm beads and stuff like that. If you're looking for a rod to throw really, really light beads, you'd probably be looking for something lighter than a 3 weight anyway, so this probably wouldn't have been the rod you were looking at. Fishing the Spanish leader with this rod was really, really nice. I think that very, very thin, lightweight material actually is what brought the best out of the blank on this rod. It actually turned it into a really, really sensitive fishing tool, and of the 3 techniques that I used with it, I'd say it's the one that probably suited the rod best. Although I'm going to caveat that with one thing. I've been talking about matte blanks on Euro nymph rods for years now. I've been an absolute champion of matte blanks. One thing I did find with this, when I was fishing in rain or when the rod got particularly wet, maybe I'd given it a dunk in the river or something like that, I did get a little bit more blank stick on the Spanish leader, on the 016mm Spanish leader stuff, than I would normally expect. In 90% of conditions it wasn't a problem at all, but I did find the matte blank in really, really wet conditions, it did get a little bit sticky with that finer material. It's not something that you can't fix just by giving the line a little sharp pull and getting it off the blank. It's something worth thinking about if you are an absolute Spanish leader nut and that's all you want to fish. Do you know what? I'm starting to wonder now whether I'm right about the matte blank thing. That said, it was incredibly sensitive with my Spanish leader setup, and as I say, of the 3 techniques, that's the one that I really thought brought the most out of the rod. In terms of what I could do with it with the Euro nymph line, it was Vision Euro nymph line I used with it. Yeah, it was absolutely fine. I caught loads of fish. I've said it over and over again. I just don't understand why you would take something that is so specifically designed for light sensitive fishing and put a Euro nymph fly line through it. Unless you're a competition angler and you're absolutely beholden by that rules, I would strongly advise having a look at either a French leader or a Spanish leader system. If that's what you've got, if you've got a Euro nymph fly line, stick it straight through it, it'll be absolutely fine. As we already talked about, because the guides are spaced nice and tightly together, because you've got that butt guide on the butt section, you're not going to get much line sag from it, so it'll fish it absolutely perfectly. In terms of the rod's ability to hook and play fish, do you know what? It's actually quite a delicately actioned rod. It's a 3 weight, but Vision tend to do quite light 3 weights. I'm thinking back to the Nymph Maniac, which was a very, very delicate 10 foot 3 weight. And actually this is pretty similar. It's probably not quite as delicate as the Nymph Maniac, which actually might lend it to fishing a fly line slightly better, something I didn't do with it actually, because it's a really specific nymph rod. One thing's for sure, caught an awful lot of fish with this rod in the last 4 or 5 months and had every opportunity to test it against the smallest of graylings, some really big trout and basically everything in between. It is an absolute fish playing wand. I have loved hooking and landing fish on this rod. That kind of delicate progressive action with loads of power down at this bottom end. Whatever I've hooked with this, I've never really felt like I was being overgunned by a fish. I always felt like I had control. It's one thing actually with the 10-foot 3 weights particularly, but the 10-foot rods in general, I think people get frightened by the weights, the 1, the 2 and the 3, because we're thinking of a weight at that end of the rod, at the tip end of the rod, forgetting that actually on a 10-foot rod, you've got a lot of carbon down here. There's an awful lot of power down at this end. So even though a 1 or a 2 or a 3 mate might feel a little bit light for the kind of fish you catch, when you think about the amount of carbon down here, the amount of power down here, you never found wanting with it. Had some absolutely belting fish on the Nymph Hero. Always enjoyed landing fish on it. Can't remember many particularly significant hook pulls. There's 1 or 2 maybe, but you always get those anyway. If you're wanting a rod that you're going to enjoy playing your trout and grayling on, absolutely perfect. The cork I really liked actually. It's reasonable quality. There's a fair amount of filler in there. Again, we've talked about this in the past. It's quite hard to find really, really good quality cork these days, particularly at the kind of price point that this rod is at. I've had the rod for 6 months. As I say, I've used it an awful lot. Nothing has come out yet. All the filler has stayed in where it is. There are no kind of burred edges at one end or the other of the cork. Pretty good that. And as I said at the start, I really like this very slim cork handle. I must admit, the first time I saw it, when I got it out of the tube, I was a little bit worried about that, because I was like, well, does that mean the cork's going to be weaker? Is it going to be more likely to hole or crumble and stuff like that? No, none of that. It's been absolutely fine. Down at this end, the reel seat, again, been really grippy, very few problems. The first few times I used it, the reel did wobble in the reel seat a little bit, and I was like, oh God, if they got this wrong. It wasn't, it was me that got it wrong. The 2 nut sizes down here are slightly different. There's a broader one that cinches down onto the reel seat, and then the lock-in nut is slightly slimmer. That lock-in nut, you can turn it a little bit more than you think, that slimmer lock-in nut. And once you've got it locked down, it never flinches. So I got that wrong the first couple of times I used it. If you're buying this rod, just remember that second lock-in nut, just give it another half turn and it'll keep everything locked right where you want it. In terms of the finish of the rod, it's generally pretty good actually. As I say, you've got that golden colour going on there that some people will or won't like. As a Vision probably not helped themselves describing it as vivid yellow. I actually think it's a really nice colour. The whippings are all good quality. The guides all seem really good quality. If I was going to be really, really picky, I'd say that some of the black tip-ins, because they've used quite translucent material for the whippings on those yellow whippings, you can see some of the tags of the black whippings. I mean, come on. It doesn't bother me. It's not the end of the world. There are some people out there that get a little bit more pernickety about this stuff. It's not the end of the world. And that, to be honest, is about as much as I can find on the rod where I thought, oh, that doesn't look right. The quality of the whippings is excellent. There's no spare varnish. There's no varnish blobs on any of the guides or anything like that. It's very, very good. It's exactly as you'd expect from a modern fly rod. The question that we've been asked most often is, how does it compare to the Nymph Maniac? That's a really interesting question, and the first thing you have to take into account there is that this rod is about 100 quid cheaper than the 10-foot 3-weight Nymph Maniac. So the first big difference is that it is significantly cheaper. The second difference actually, and it's something that I touched on during the Nymph Maniac review we did a few years back, is that actually this has more of those nymph specific features like the reel seat locking down, like the guide on the butt section. More stuff going on in terms of real specific nymphing features than the Nymph Maniac had. In terms of those things, I actually prefer it. One thing I'm going to throw out there straight away is that I think that the blank on the Nymph Maniac, as well as being lighter, is probably a little bit more refined and a little bit more cultured than this. You'd expect that from a rod that is 100 quid cheaper. So if you're buying this expecting to get the same Nymph Maniac blank, you're probably going to be a little bit disappointed because it is different. That said, all the other features on this rod the Nymph Maniac doesn't have probably adds up to a package of about the same, if not slightly better in terms of value than what you get from the Nymph Maniac. So if your question is, how does it compare to the Nympho? I'd say, yeah, it's probably not quite the same quality of blank, but it's definitely got those other features that you would really want. So as you've guessed guys, I really, really like this rod. I think it's an absolutely fantastic piece of kit. Excellent value for money. Now Vision are retailing these at somewhere around about £220, but I'm finding them for about 200 quid at UK retailers, which is the absolute kind of benchmark fly rod in the UK. It's great to be able to talk about the kind of high-flung 5, 6, 7, 800 pound fly rods, but the reality is, in the UK fly fishing marketplace, the market value is about 70 to 200 quid. That's where the bulk of the fishing rods that get sold in the UK sit in terms of a price point. And this is bang in there. And I'll tell you what, this is going to cause a real problem to all the other manufacturers who have got rods in that kind of range, because there's nothing about the Nymph Hero that you could fault. It is absolutely bang on for the money. It's very, very good. It's so good, in fact, that having got the first one and thought to myself, do you know what? Yeah, this is a really, really good rod. I've actually gone out and got a second one. So I've been using the Sierra Brook 10-foot 2 weights for my guiding rods for the last 4 years. A real Generation 1 nymphing rod. Sierra did a great job on the Brook when they first came out. It had the Generation 1 features. It didn't have the reel seat quite right. It didn't have the guides quite right. But they've been very, very solid rods, and around about £200 they were excellent value for money. Vision have just walked straight into that marketplace and blown it apart, and I've decided that I'm going to replace those old Sierras. We'll retire those, and for the next 2, 3, 4 years, the rods that my clients are going to be using when they come out with me on a day's fishing are Vision Nymph Hero 10-foot 3 weights. If that is not a mark of what I think of these rods, I don't know what is. We've talked about the rods, we've talked about the features, we've talked about the price, the value, all of that stuff. One thing I haven't touched on there actually, just while I've got it in front of me, is the Vision Rod Guarantee. Now I'm going to talk about this specifically for UK based anglers, but I know Vision have a broader warranty for other countries around the world, so there'll be something relevant to where you are. So you get the rod and it comes with this little piece of paper that's got loads of stuff on it. I'll try and find the English one. There we go, UK and Ireland. So it's backed up by a company called Guide Fly Fishing, who are the distributor for Vision. It does say on here that the cost of a claim for a single-handed rod is £20. Now, I've also checked that on the Vision website, and I know that's now wrong. The cost of a warranty replacement section for all Vision single-handed rods in the UK at the time I've made this video is 35 quid. Fair play Vision, that's pretty much how everyone should do it. And as long as they've got the sections in stock, that should work great. Guys, there we go, that is it. That is my full lowdown on the Vision Nymph Hero 10-foot 3 weight. A great blank for all sorts of Euro nymphing. Loads of features that you'd expect from a nymphing rod in 2022. Things are moving on, we're progressing, things are getting better, the features are getting better, the rods are getting better, and at that kind of price range, I'd be very, very, very shocked if there was a better 10-foot 3 weight on the market at the moment than the Vision Nymph Hero. If you want to check out the rod a little bit more, we'll put some links in the description box below. There'll be affiliate links, so if you buy a rod, if you buy anything, IB and I get a little bit of percentage of the profit. We take it off of Amazon or we take it off of eBay. Those guys have got enough money anyway. We really appreciate the support with that. We really appreciate the support that you guys are giving us buying stuff off the web shop in the last couple of months. That's still fully in stock. Everything's still there. If you want to go and check that out, this is the web address just there. Go and check out some of the grayling packs, trout packs, all the other cool stuff we've got going on in the web shop. We are very grateful for your support. Right guys, that is it. I'm going to go and start editing. Thank you very much for watching this view. Really appreciate it. If you've got one of the rods, please let us know what you think of it. If you were thinking about buying a new nymphing rod and this might have changed what you were thinking, or if it might have confirmed the idea that you had that you were going to buy a Nymph Hero, please let us know in the comments section. Other than that, IB and I are going to see you guys soon for some more fishing and stuff. Take care, folks. Bye-bye.